So, welcome everybody to the second round, or for some of you who were in the our winter study class, the third go-round with our distinguished alumni visitor here, Mr. Abdoulaye Magassouba, former Minister of Mines in Geology in Guinea, and former expert copier in auditing firms and many other things, as we discovered in the session yesterday. And really, it was wonderful yesterday to hear all the advice that you had for the current CDE fellows based on your experience, not just about copying, but really about sort of figuring out what was important to you. And you talked very eloquently about how public service was what you knew you wanted to get into, and about the important things to focus on, and how you maintain that focus in some difficult situations. So what I thought would be interesting to start the session here today would be, tell us a little bit, so what was your inspiration to get into public service? Because you talked a lot about how this really sort of kept you going and helped you make all those unexpected decisions that you referred to. But what really inspired you to go down this route?
Thanks, Bernie. It's as I said, my father was a public servant. So since I was a child, I grew up seeing him so dedicated and involved in his job. And over the years, as a kid, you always wonder what is motivating your parents to wake up every single morning. And during his career, he was at some point leading a very remote town in the country, South Lola, maybe you know, where the Nimba Mountain is. And he provided electricity to that city for the first time in their history. And when I went there, I had a discussion with some people and with him, and that increased somehow my interest for public service. And at some point, when I was at KPMG, I was working on development projects, especially in the health sector. And I realized that there is a lot of potential to do something, to make something happen. So being from the outside, saying just people are incompetent, there are bureaucracy, and if you deal with individuals, you see that there is a lot of potential, but at some point it's the system or the leadership at the director level or things like that. So I said, okay, maybe I can do something in the public service for real. I was already very interested. The choice of my research at the bachelor level was clearly in that direction. But at that point, I decided in mid-2000, I decided to make the move completely, and that's where I started this Fulbright program. And CDE was a real, somehow the end of the process, the preparation process to that goal. So yeah, since I was a child, somehow, and actually, there is one thing that was also very important in terms of mindset, because sometimes when you are working in the private sector, you have a very good job and you are well paid, you think that that's enough. But actually, I realized also that at that point that more than half of my salary was going to make up for inefficiencies that were somehow originated from the public service. You don't have electricity, you need to have a generator, right? Yeah. It costs you money. you don't have a good road, it means that repair and maintenance costs are very high. You can list several things like that. So at some point I said, even if it's a selfish decision, in a rational basis, it's a good thing to do. Go, work there, and fortunately I worked on energy projects. So we went from 100 megawatt of hydro power capacity to 1,000. So somehow today, if I'm enjoying having electricity 24 hours a day, it means that somehow that goal, even selfish goal, somehow has been also achieved. So it's for me, it's natural. And at the end of the day, in terms of personal beliefs, what remains? If you have billions, you don't leave this world with your billions. But if you do something for your community, so 100 years later, people will still be referring to what you've done. Some people, left this world maybe centuries, if not a millennium ago, but people are still useful to the world, they are still useful to their communities. So that's also a very simple and clear reason.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, that mix of factors that have inspired you. Certainly the starting one of partially modeling on parents, of course, I can empathize with. I think everybody here knows. So that's the second one of the, from the left on the top row is my father. So we have the CDE connection that goes way back here as well. So let me take you back now to, take us back to some of the things you talked about yesterday and go a little bit more in the depth on some of these. So you talked yesterday about, so you had your experience that started with the copying machine, and then you learned more about the private sector and how it worked. And then you got your first opportunities in public service by becoming an assistant in the presidency, and that coincided with the Ebola crisis. So I think it'd be interesting to hear, how did a crisis like Ebola affect some of the decisions you were making, or how you were trying to manage, or how you were advising the presidency to manage some of the big projects that you were working on?
Look, it's the Ebola crisis was a big shock to us. You know, when you are in a regional economic space, but at the end of the day, the borders are closed. The neighboring countries close their borders. When you travel abroad, you are, you are like treated like somebody somehow holding illicit substances. So it changes your perspective about the development of a country. One thing was that, the first thing was that we need to rely on ourselves first. Saying, okay, we have partners, we have friends, that's good. But when it comes to serious crisis, it's for us to stand for ourselves and make things happen. So at that point, and we remember the Ebola crisis happened after maybe 3 years of the regime, when the regime was in place. So the trends were relatively good. You know, with the deal with Rio Tinto, we had enough money because that was like $700 million at once, and the economic prospects were relatively good. But from that point on, one thing that was clear is that, okay, we need to have a strong health system, because we cannot afford having this kind of crisis back again. The other thing was that until the investment is actually done made in the country, it's still very fragile. If you have a project of 5 billion, if they have only invested 100 million, so if you have such a crisis, people would just say, okay, we'll wait until the crisis will pass. But if they have invested 4 billion, now the question is, how do we get around it and complete it, because we have reached a no-return point. So on the private sector side, that was also one thing. And the other thing that was also really clear to us, it was that we need to have a very strong local private sector. Because if the international companies or providers of services or goods can be reluctant to come to the country and work with the country, the local ones, they have no choice. If they're powerful enough, if the local private sector is powerful enough and capable of meeting the needs in terms of public works, services and procurement, then even if you have such a crisis, it will be cushioned by the fact that the local private sector can take over part of the things the international private sector might be doing. So there were, I think it changed significantly the way we thought about designing policies and implementing policies, so that this notion of very notion of local content, from that point on, it has become a very a top priority on the political agenda. So these are some of the things that were very important, very important shift somehow we made mentally and in terms of the way we approach policy design and policy implementation.
Great examples. Now let me move you forward. So you had this period as an advisor, and then as you told us yesterday, you got approaches from some important people about, why don't you consider this job, this position, and as you said, some of the positions were important, but you decided we're not the right thing for you. And then you were offered the position of Minister of Mines and Geology. Now, there are a lot of countries where the position of Minister of Mines is basically a ticket to a lot of conferences and having long naps in your office, right? But not exactly in Guinea. So tell, maybe share with the fellows why was this a completely different situation in a country like Guinea, and why was it so motivating to you to be able to step into a position like that?
Yeah, look, the first time I knew that I might be appointed after this 2013 call I was talking about. I think after that, psychologically, I started getting ready. But in September 2015, I had a situation that showed me that, okay, it might be you. And actually, the Minister of Mines is the most important economic ministry in the country. Mines represent around 90% of Guinea's exports. In terms of GDP, it's not that big. It's fairly around 20 or so.
Is that the highest in the world? It must be pretty close.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And but the issue is that in a country that is struggling to develop the private sector, that is struggling with education, so that all the potential human capital potential can be really exploited. Mining is the main focus of the people. And while in other sectors, $10 million investment is a big deal mining is like it's one of the smallest projects. So all eyes are on mining somehow, because people also think that this is the industry where we can get, in the short run, we can get something for the country. And many people also think we can get something for ourselves. That's a reality I cannot deny. So all eyes are on mining. So when I was appointed, look, for me, there was no challenge that couldn't be overcome, but I just needed to make sure I deal with it in the right way. First, have a strong team. Second, set your priorities. And we were coming out of the Ebola crisis. That made the challenge even more important, because the mining industry was almost in kind of stagnation for a couple of years. So taking on that challenge at that point, to tell you the truth, I was like, okay, I will do 100%, 200% of my energy if I can. I will do everything to make things happen, to get real results. While, since there is so much noise around in the sector, I was like, okay, you should be a mining minister that will have a very low profile. It's a very exposed industry, so have a very low profile. Speak through your achievements. So after a few months, we started getting some achievements. So that gave us some momentum to build on that, and then try to, consolidate somehow the bauxite boom and try to create room for investment in other subsectors. But mining is a very big deal for Guinea. And anytime you talk about iron ore in the world, people always refer to that biggest untapped high-grade iron ore deposit, the Simandou and the Nimba. People might not know, but these deposits, they are like, I'm talking about like something like overall 5 billion or 6 billion tons of iron ore at an average grade of 65%. So if you go to the mountain, it's like, pure iron ore laying on the ground. So there is a lot of interest for mining because of that, because of the fact that bauxite, bauxite is the raw material for aluminum, and aluminum is highly used for planes. So the boom, I was saying to Rachel yesterday that probably what happened with Boeing, to refer to the biggest company here in that area, in this last 50, 60 years, the bauxite was coming from Bokeh in Guinea. The planes that were built, probably maybe, I don't know how many percent of a plane is made of aluminum, but it's an important percentage. And that gives you how strategic are the minerals that we have in Guinea, and how important can be that sector for the grassroots people.
I like that image you proposed there, Magasso. So the fellows, as time goes by and their careers are moving along and they're flying from one place to another, increasingly they can think of themselves as they're flying on the exports of Guinea.
Yeah.
So that's good. I like that. I like that image. That was very good. Now, so thanks for walking through that. And Simandou, of course, is a name very well known in Africa and in mining circles, but maybe not as well known in other places. So great that you referred to that. And that was something you and I had a chance to do some work together on, and that was terrific. But now let's I want to pick up on something you just referred to in there about how in a country with mineral resources, natural resources like Guinea has, that exploiting those resources is a chance to get something for the country, but as you said, also some people are thinking of it as a chance to get something for me. So this raises the issue of governance, of course. So I think the theory is, of course, a country with extensive natural resources, exploiting those and exporting those is going to, this should rebound to great profit to the economy and to the people. But as we know, in a number of countries, that equation has not worked as well. And in particular, you've had issues with, let's call them euphemistically, leakages, right? So that a lot of the money that's generated, the wealth that's generated from those resources doesn't in the end reach the people that one hopes that it reaches. So, and of course, the issue of governance in the resource sector, particularly around Simandou, is legendary in Guinea, as we know. So I was looking around the room here, so we've moved things around, but the fellows who come into this room during the week, you see a lot of old back issues of the New Yorker magazine lying around on some of the tables here. Now, the back issues probably don't go far enough back for you to see a very famous article published in the New Yorker on Guinea. It was called Buried Secrets. Maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. I forget exactly. But it was quite a saga. I mean, even by the standards of the New Yorker, this was a fascinating story to read about diamond merchants and gifts of jet planes and all these different nationalities and whatnot that wound up in a New York courtroom, which is why a lot of the details came out of all of this. So now you fast forward from the period that was discussed in that article and where a particular reputation was made, and now after you and some of your colleagues have been there, the reputation of governance in the sector has changed dramatically. Right? So you have a great improvement in the reality and the reputation of governance in that sector. And I think it'd be interesting for some of the fellows to hear, so what were some of the things that you did to improve governance and to see that, in a country like Guinea, where there's so much potential wealth, that the exploitation of that results in the kind of numbers you shared with the class on Friday. Significant economic growth, significant growth of revenue, so the kind of things that you hope for from an economic standpoint. So what kind of things did you do here?
Look, in terms of having the right level of positive impact on communities, on local communities, and on the nation as a whole, we still have a long way to go. But what was in place, we had different tools on that front. One was a local fund for economic development that concerned revenues paid by mining companies directly to local communities. A second tool was all this compensation of environmental, social, and economic impact directly from mining companies, because based on the assessment that is made at the beginning. Another thing that was kind of revolutionary.
I'm just going to interrupt you a second, just to have you repeat that, because this is something that you and your teams developed in Guinea to a greater extent than you see in a lot of other places. Just say maybe a couple more words on that.
We gave it in the name of FODEL. It's Fond de Développement Économique Local. It was provided. It was in the provisions of the mining code, but it wasn't implemented when I was appointed. So we had weeks and months of thinking, consultations, because to have a fair way and an effective way to implement that. So it wasn't only about the money being transferred to the communities. It was about a fair distribution of that money across local communities. Because if you take what we call prefecture, you have different communes. You can have 10 communes. Actually, the mining site can be on one. But the mining concession can be on 3. But the other ones are still impacted by the project to some extent. So we said, okay, we need to compensate for all these guys. Before the implementation, it was like, okay, where the mining site is, the guys used to take all the money and invest and give maybe pocket money to the surrounding communes. So doing that, you will create, compensate somehow for the economic impact on other communes, even if they don't have the mining sites. Because one thing that we should have in mind, in migration is one of the biggest issues in mining. You have a place where you had 5,000 people, there is a mining site there, 5 years later you come, there is 100,000 people there, without the basic infrastructure following the rhythm of population growth. We have a city that was 10,000 where we have this company that is providing bauxite for aluminum for Boeing. We had 10,000 people there in the 60s. Now it's 500,000 people city. So these are things having that scheme in place helped compensate for that. But we had another one. You know, this one was directly paid from the mining companies to the populations, to the communities. But at the national level, the mining code provided for a 15%, that 15% of mining revenues that will go to the general budget be transferred to local communities. So that was an additional thing, but that one had an additional somehow objective. In addition, not only mining areas, it was for the whole country. So if a prefecture had a mining operation, another one had no mining operation, so was getting no direct benefit. It could get some benefit through that. So that scheme was also put in place. Another tool that I referred to previously was local content. Local content is mainly hiring local people, training them, but most importantly, local procurement. Because for Simandou, when it will reach the operation phase, we're talking about something around the whole Simandou, something about 2 billion operation cost per year. So if the country can capture even 1 billion in that amount, half of that amount, it's like a third of our current budget that can go in terms of local procurement to companies. What does that provide to them? Financial capacity, technical capacity, and it will help create local champions. And we talk about the Ebola, the consequences of Ebola. Having local champions will help deal more efficiently with external shocks. Another tool is, of course, the taxes that are paid and dividends that are paid directly to the state. Actually, that is a big debate, but the truth is that at the beginning, that's not at the level one could expect. That's because it's the recoupment of period of the investment, but over time, that will increase.
Again.
So we'll certainly get to a level that is satisfactory. But to come back to the governance around all these things we've done, but we still have a long way to go. In terms of governance, there are few things that were really important. One thing, you need to have the right people. Second thing, you need to set clear rules that yourself you respect 100%. It's easy to tell people you need to work hard, but it's easier to make them work hard if they see you working hard. Another thing that is critical in mining is transparency. It's key. And actually, transparency, people sometimes see it as a way of being compliant to the request of NGOs and things. No. Transparency is a way of getting everybody on board, one thing. Second, it's a very good tool in making your reforms irreversible. Because once we used to publish all the contracts. So if somebody comes after, doesn't publish the contract, people will ask, no, we are not used to that. We used to have things out. So if you start being dealing with the contract between four walls, it's going to be an issue. No contract was signed by me without it going through the cabinet. So all the ministers are aware, it's very well discussed there, and then it's taken there to the parliament, extensively discussed. We might not agree on everything, but at the end of the day, nobody would say it was a secret contract and things like that. And even for private companies, it puts them on check somehow. And even the way they approach the negotiations, they know that it's going to come out, so there are some things they don't ask as they would if it was secret negotiations. The other thing was also to make sure that the whole system was as efficient and effective as possible. The key, I mean, the heart of mining is permitting. The heart of mining is permitting.
The cadastre.
The cadastre. So the cadastre, by September, the reform started before, but by September 2016, the cadastre was online. It's online. You just Google it.
One of the few countries where it is, actually.
It's online, and everything that is done is put in the system, it's seen online. So sometime an investor would call me, look, I went online, I didn't see this, but I went to the direction there, people told me a different story. So it puts everybody on check. But that cadastre, having it online, having the process published, the process, I said, it was online, how much you need to pay at every single step was online, at the central bank, everything was clear, so that the process was smoother. No secret process somewhere. We went from an average 3-month time processing time to 2 weeks. So it was these are things in terms of governance that help build credibility. And of course, no matter, there were situations where we had sometimes gentleman agreement, okay? You just shake hands. But it's very important that even if an agreement is not written,
it becomes transparent.
To be clear on what you commit on and effectively implement it. We had, I will finish by this, in terms of credibility. I had an investor that decided to invest 1 billion without having the contracts. Only after 5 minutes discussion we had. He said, okay, I used to take my bauxite from here to my factories. I want to take it now from Guinea. We've made some investment, we are producing them, but I need to build a railway that will cost more than $1 billion. Can you tell us that you can create conditions that will protect our investment so that we can get access to bauxite resources to recoup the investment? I said yes, and then we were done. And he started maybe a couple of months later, spending on the ground, and the contract was signed maybe 6 or 9 or 8 months later. So that is something that is also critical. But to build credibility, you need to stick to your commitments. You need to have the right capacities, because when you discuss with somebody, they need to know that you understand what you're talking about. And when I say you, it's the whole team, and have all the technical capacity you need. Don't be shy of going, taking an international law firm or technical firm, as long as they are prepared to have local content, have local companies build their capacities. Today, if you look at the ranking of lawyers in Africa, you will see at least 2 or 3 Guinean law firms. You know where it comes from? It comes from local content. So all these international law firms, we used to ask them, you pick any local law firm you want, but you need to have a local law firm with you. And now they are now independent, and they are shining, I mean, in other countries in Africa.
Lots of information there, but I think great for, I think the fellows here are likely at some point in their careers to run across governance challenges like you have, maybe not on the same scale. So great that you shared your experience from that. Let me ask you now about a different kind of challenge, still quite large scale in this, other than governance. So as you told us yesterday, I mean, Guinea, in particular around the mines, has become very much of a melting pot. You have all sorts of international groups around, and in the ministry you were seeing Brazilians, Saudis, Emiratis, Russians, Chinese, Brits, South Africans, whatever were in there. Right? So I'm sure plenty of challenges in managing that. But let's talk, maybe you could share a little bit of experience specifically of that group. There's one particular group that tends to write checks with more zeros than the other groups, and that's the Chinese. So can you share any kind of experience of your interactions with the various Chinese groups that were interested in the mining in Guinea, and sort of how you handle those?
Look, it's, when it comes to the choice of the origin of the partners, we have a very clear policy. And it's been the case for a long time, maybe since the independence. Maybe. Any credible partner with a viable project, and a partner that has capacities, and credible with a viable project that can be mutually beneficial, is welcome. That's the way we function. You can have the change of president, the change of minister, but Guineans usually they are on that line actually. And with that in mind, the funding for the market for mining, the growing market for mining, for the last 2 decades, mostly, has been China. The largest growing market has been China. It's gonna be India in maybe 10, 20 years. it's going to be Africa in 30, 50 years, for sure. So with that in mind, the access to the funding for mining companies, even if you deal with other entities, private companies from other countries, most of them go to China to get funding for their projects. So dealing directly with the Chinese is a way of us to deal with those who will provide funding for the project and also be the market for the project, so make it bankable. So based on that, and we are not, we don't choose to go to China or to Russia or to the US or to France. They come to us. So when they come, we assess exactly the proposal that is on the table on its own merit, and also the capacity to meet the commitments. What happened, and I think there is a misperception on the Chinese involvement in Guinea, particularly speaking about Guinea. Actually, the largest deposit of bauxite in Guinea is held by a JV with an American company. The deposit I was referring to, it's around 6 billion tons of world-class bauxite reserves. If you take that deposit, you compare it to all Chinese in Guinea, Chinese companies in Guinea, the deposit that are with all Chinese companies in Guinea, actually that company alone surpasses all Chinese companies combined. But they are numerous. So if you have 10, 5, 6, 7 Chinese companies, you have one Russian company, so you might think, okay, there's and this is an answer I gave to one of my British friends. It was one, they have, these Chinese companies have less than the third of the known resources in bauxite, but yet they are making 2/3 of the investment. He was saying, you are not being fair to people. I said, no, who aren't we fair to? They have 1/3 of the assets. They are making 2/3 of the investments. So, but with that said, I think that the most important thing for us is to make sure we have a responsible development of our mines that will account for the environmental impact, the impact on communities, and also the impact, the overall economic impact on the country. But no matter the origin of the company, you will see some companies that have good standards and some others that don't have good standards. As I said yesterday, what we try to do is to insert reference standards in the contracts. As you know, IFC is a reference, IFC standards are a reference, so we insert these references even in contracts with Chinese companies. The second thing we started doing, but we still need to really keep working on that, is monitoring and evaluation. Assessment along the way of the implementation of the standards that are good, that we set
that were agreed on
at the beginning. So it's a permanent work. We still have, I think that is one of our weaknesses, if I may say, that the monitoring and the assessment afterward. That is one of the things we need to reinforce.
Takes a lot of work, yeah.
But look, we are a very, very small cat in a world of elephants. So we pay big attention to not be involved in some situations that can be bad for the country. While we are, look, we had a communist regime, but that communist regime built a state. You know on what? On the deal with the U.S. In '63, that deal with the U.S. on that bauxite project somehow saved Guinea. We built, back then, everything was done from the money. Most of the things were done from the money that was coming from that very project. And that deal was made between our first president and I think it was the President Kennedy back then.
Geopolitics makes strange bedfellows, yeah?
Yeah, so the US are our friends.
Yeah.
The French are our friends. The Russians are our friends.
Okay.
The Chinese are our friends.
Lots of friends.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
good.
all. Having good friends,
Okay.
you never have too much good friends, right?
Right. And thanks to this weekend, now you have 20 plus new good friends here, Magass, and I'm about to turn it over to them to ask you some more questions. But I have one more for you before opening it up here, which is we were a bit at fault in our introductions of our distinguished alumni speaker here the past couple of days, because we've introduced him in terms of his public service and his role in the government, but he is also now a published author. And this is a copy of his recent book, Guinea's Mines Unveiled, about the mining industry in Guinea. And it'd be great, Magass, if you just said a couple words to the fellows about so what made you write this, and what's the kind of main message you hope people take away from your book?
Oh, look. Actually, I started writing this book in December 2019. I was minister. There is a lot of misperception on mining because it's a very complex industry. And there are so many interests, so many lobbies around that sometimes the essence of what's happening and why it's happening is not seized by the general audience. And there are things for people it's difficult to understand. Why are they doing this? It's not good for the country. Why at that stage, in that context, that is the best thing to do for the country. So I was like, okay, I need to write everything down. I love writing, so it was easy for me to choose that. So my thinking was that, okay, the day I will leave the ministry, I will publish it. And I finished it while I was minister, but I didn't want it to be seen as, okay, him trying to defend his position. He want to stay minister forever. Maybe that's why. Okay. So the idea was that, okay, for Guineans, mostly for Guineans, for them to see, okay, this is what actually happened. And there are many things that were not understood by many people, a few years ago. They understand it more today, because if you have more information and more time to digest it, at some point you see, okay, maybe he's right, he was right on this. So my thinking was, okay, this is our legacy. It's not perfect, but this is what we were able to do for the country, given the context. Now for the investors, it's also for them to understand the complexities of the Guinean environment and how the reforms that we put in place where to create an environment that was more conducive to, a safe investment. For students, it's for them, be Guinean students, be foreign students, it's for them also to understand how how mining works. If there is many pages on these tax issues for tax revenues. People compare things that you cannot compare apples with bananas. So if you compare Guinea to Botswana, you're not making the right comparison for several reasons. One, Guinea is most of its production, it's bulk commodities. You need big infrastructure to export them. Diamond, you can put it in your pocket and move with it. So you don't need big infrastructure. Two is that the investment happened there decades ago. So it's already recouped. So you cannot compare what Botswana is gaining today as revenues to Guinea that has just started having new operations that are not, for which the investment is not recouped yet. Many reasons like that can explain gaps you can see that can be somehow filled over time. So it's also a matter of context. If you take a mining project, you are dealing with three contexts. One is the endogenous context of the project. Okay? It's economics around with not linked with the environment. The second is the national context. A project that is done in Guinea today, it might be, with the same content, might be different from a project that will be done in 5 years. The political context, the economic context, the social context might be completely different. So you don't negotiate the two in the same way. You now have the global context. The way you will negotiate a gold project today, while gold is high with all the uncertainties around, wasn't the way you would have negotiated maybe 10 years ago, where the gold was around maybe $1,000 an ounce, while recently it has been close to 2,000. So all these subtleties, all these complexities cannot be seized through a contract, through a speech. So these are some of the things I try to explain. And also say that, okay, if you negotiate right now, if you are looking for 100% success in a negotiation, you can still reach 100%. But the only question is, how long are you ready to wait? If you are negotiating with somebody in any circumstances, if you won 100%, you can get it. But maybe you can get it in 10 years' time. So if you want things to happen in 1 year, maybe you should target 40%. If it's in 2 years, maybe you should target 60%. So at the end of the day, it's about when you want things to happen and how you want them to happen. You guys will be negotiating, all professional, in most of the professional things you do, apart from what you do on your laptop, in your office, it's about negotiating something. Getting people to do something, or you do something for them to be satisfied. So it's always important to weigh in the bargaining position you have, the timing you aim into, and what is sufficient for you at that point in time. So these are things that we've been dealing with many kind of people from all the continents, and I can tell you it's very different to deal with a French as compared to deal with an American or a Russian or a Chinese or an Australian. It's completely different. So I will finish with that. Culture, you need to, and again, yesterday I was referring to that. It's important to be mindful of the culture of people you're dealing with, to make sure that you can give them the best you want, you can get out of them the best you want for you guys to succeed together.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, this reinforces our conversation of the other day that he would make a great professor at some point. So this is one of these days. Thank you, Magassouba. Let me open up the floor for questions from the groups here. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. I think we are continuing from yesterday. I would like to have a follow-up question on the issue of the local development revenue, how it was administered in terms of giving cash to the community. Was there any involvement of the government? If there was no involvement of the government, how did it...
Sorry, when government, local government or central government?
Local government.
Local government,
yes,
okay.
yes. How it was administered. And also, how did you manage to do the issue of the local village heads, the issue of chiefs, with regards to manipulation of the payment system?
Sure.
Then the other question is about the issue of illegal miners.
Illegal mines?
Illegal miners, yes, artisanal miners.
Artisanal mines.
Yes, I understand that the mining sector is usually infested with illegal artisanal miners. So how did you manage to organize them so that they contribute meaningfully to the national development?
Two great questions there.
Two great
please,
questions.
Yeah, please.
Regarding the...
Would you like to take a couple more questions, or you want to go ahead and field these now?
No, I prefer
Okay,
so
sure.
that...
However you prefer, yeah, please, go ahead.
No, the first one is about the governance of the local Fund for Economic Development. Actually, to be concrete, the money was sent to an account at the central bank that was under the name of the whole prefecture. And then there was the calculation of the share that should go to each of the communes, let's say the 10 communes. And then from that account, transfers were made to each of the communes' accounts. So the communes, that is the local government, at the local government level. So they are elected.
They have control over it, yeah.
Yeah. So they are the one who were meant to spend the amount. And on what basis? You have the local development plans that to which you have you should put you should also account for the local investment annual investment plans. These are meant to be built in a dialogue between all local leaders, including the local chiefs and things like that. So they all are meant to agree with on a local development plan that is the basis to spend the money.
So it was like a CDE community development fund.
Yeah. It works like a community development fund. So now, based on the amount, because the local development plan is for all fundings, okay? So when the money is available, based on the amount that is available, they will decide which project in the local development plan will be funded by this amount and plan it accordingly and execute it. It wasn't perfect because there is a lot of capacity issues at that point, even governance issues at that point. But it's an imperfect system, but that for me is a good thing to get things done at the grassroots level. Now to go to your artisanal gold mining, artisanal mining. In our country, it's only about gold and diamond.
There's not a lot of artisanal iron ore development.
Definitely no.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we don't have that at this point. but gold and diamond, mainly gold, because diamond is really, we don't have enough research on it. We had an area where you had diamond artisanal mining for decades, but I think the reserves are getting very loaded. So now the main issue is about gold. So there are reforms that are done in that area. In terms of contribution, yesterday I was mentioning the central bank foreign currency reserves. They contribute a lot to that. In Guinea, you have more than 200,000 people involved directly in artisanal mining. The big issue, it's environmental impact. So some use chemical products that pollute rivers. Also, the safety is not respected. And what we had a first, I would say, wave of reforms we started when I was minister. But to tell you the truth, we didn't actually succeed for two reasons. One was I did underestimate, personally, that was a mistake. I did underestimate the technical capacity that was needed. Because it's afterward, when I discussed with people from all around the world, some from Latin America, how they were dealing with artisanal mining, I realized that there is no solution that is working properly. And so we had to invent the wheel, and we didn't have the technical muscle for that. Second, I think for our countries to succeed in reforming artisanal mining, we need a lot of investment. It takes a lot of money. Why? Because you're talking about 200,000 people that are helping to stabilize the currency and to give a reserve to the central bank for imports and things like that. So you cannot just dismiss that. Mm-hmm. You cannot, for me, it's an opportunity, the way I call it in the book is a risky opportunity. Mm. It's an opportunity, but that goes with a lot of risk. To to deal with the risks, we need to invest. One of the solutions I had in mind, but I couldn't implement, was to there was an export tax. My idea was, okay, why not take part of that tax and dedicate it to the reform? Put schemes in place where they can have access to equipment, access to technical assistance, and access to all the package they need, not for free, of course, borrowing, but it would be a fund that would at least cover the cost as a guarantee or something like guarantee scheme or something like that, so that they can move from that very damaging on the environmental and social things aspects to a more responsible artisanal mining. We worked with GIZ, I think, who is from GIZ? Somebody. Yeah, we worked with GIZ that we had the pilot projects with GIZ. The pilot project worked fairly well, but we couldn't put it at scale for issues we had with partners, local partners. So it's a very, very difficult thing to deal with. The most important thing, there are two things for me that are critical. One, it's security, safety. They wanted me at some point to sign some papers that will allow people to use machines and do things. I say, as long as I'm not sure that I will put no life at risk, I will not sign it. No matter what is the benefit for the country or for the people, it's not worth it. So I think that now the government seems to be finding solutions around that. Hopefully These are solutions that will work. And the second thing that is important, apart from people's lives, it's the environmental impact. It's so in some areas, you can see it's like if you were on the moon. And people even have issues now because in villages where you don't have the water system, water network, they go to the rivers to take water, to eat, to cook, and to drink, to cook, everything. So if that water is polluted, how can they do? And the pollution can even go to the wells. So these are things that are very complicated. And the fact is that if it's not well organized, some people, a small number of people, keep making the large amount of people work and just get all the benefit. You know, that is a story that touched me a lot. One day I went to visit a gold mining, artisanal gold mining area. Since it was very well organized, when you are a minister, it's difficult sometimes. People organize things so that you see,
can't really see
what
what's going
they
on.
want you to see. So we were just in the bush. I told them, I saw a lady walking around. I asked them to stop the car. And I went out of the car. I went to discuss with the lady. The lady she had a child on her back, maybe that was 1 year old or so. And I discussed with the lady. In 2 weeks, she only had $1.5 worth of money. And she was coming from very far. So there are many people like that are kind of managed and exploited by some local chiefs or things like that, or businessmen. So it's a very social, it's a big social challenge. It's a big environmental challenge. It's a big safety challenge, but still, it's a big economic opportunity, not only for people there, but for the country as a whole.
Great balanced answer there. Okay, we got a few more questions. Make sure we'll do one question each because there's several hands. I want to accommodate people. Jean-Jacques?
I'm sorry for being too long.
No, it's
this,
great. Great answer. So just, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Thank you to our distinguished alumni. We are learning a lot since Friday. I have a question about resilience. We know that we had like 2 major crises in less than a decade, which are Ebola and COVID-19, and we know how strong they can have an impact in our economy. So, is there any kind of framework that you could build as you experienced both, especially as a minister or as a country as a whole? Did you build some framework to have some kind of room to be ready if we have another one, which comes in, let's say,
Interesting question.
Next 5 years or next 10 years? What kind of experience can you share with it, as we are all policymakers, future policymakers? How can we get ready to have some kind of response?
Great question.
That's a good question. Look, resilience, since you didn't precise on which side, I will take both sides, on the economic side and on the health side, as far as I know about it. On the economic side, the first, and all the papers you will read about Guinea's economy in this recent years, from the IMF, from the World Bank, there is one word that comes: resilience because of mining. You always see that. The Guinean economy has been resilient because of mining, despite the fact that it's not very inclusive. But that is recognized. There are 2 things that are critical about economic resilience based on the and how your economy is organized. First is the maturity of activities you have in place. Because, look, if somebody is already producing, selling, especially on the international market, he's more resilient than somebody that is at the investment stage, only spending. So there is nothing, no resource somehow to compensate for the shock that is coming in. So that's why I always have a comparison between the Ebola crisis and the COVID crisis and the way they were perceived by the Guinean mining sector. On the Ebola crisis, we were at the early stage of the boom somehow. No, before the boom, I would say. So the investment was just starting. So they were like, okay, we'll wait.
Much more fragile. Yeah.
But when the COVID-19 crisis happened, they had already invested. So the question was that how do we keep moving? How can we work together to keep moving? So it wasn't about leaving the country. It was about staying in the country and make things work. So they had some health corridors that were put in place in operation. There were little disruption in many mining areas because of that. So that is the first thing. So the maturity of the activities you have, how far they're gone, have you passed the point of no return? That is the one thing that is important. The second thing is diversification of the economy. Because not all sectors are hit the same way. Hospitality almost disappeared for months. People were not traveling to different countries, so the hotels, it was complicated. While some other sectors were working well. So the more diversified your economy is, the more likely it could be for you to resist the shock, because the shock is hit different sectors in a different way. And there are sectors that are more, I mean, that are, I don't know how to say this so that I won't be misunderstood. There are sectors that are, that thrive in a crisis period.
Counter-cyclical.
Yeah, so if there is security issues in an area, people would keep calling every single day, more often than they used to, right? So cell phone companies in some areas work very well while there is a big security issue. So it's diversification. And within the mining industry, we made sure that we push a lot so that we won't only rely on bauxite. Because gold is a refuge mineral somehow. So pushing for gold could help cushion the effect of crisis, because in crisis time, gold tend to be still be safe. And we had I think 3 or 4 new operations in gold. There are certainly a couple of big operations that will start in the coming years, for which we signed the first initial licenses a few years ago. So that is on the economics. And the health side, you know, actually what we realized was that people were putting a lot of money on like big infrastructures, hospitals in urban areas and things like that. But Ebola made us realize that outreach health scheme on the ground is more effective and more important for people than building many big hospitals and things like that. Because there were areas people didn't want to see government representatives or health representatives, because they were like, we've been here for how long? We are not used to seeing you guys. It was very difficult to get into some communities and discuss, make them understand that they were there to help them, and people, because of the nature of the disease, especially Ebola, people were hiding the people who were sick somehow. So having people on the ground, health agents in communities and things like that, I think that these are things that we started doing. I'm not sure we kept consolidating them, but these are things that this is one of the lessons we learn. And also, of course, we could do some research in the country and be more prepared, because the health system in Guinea was stronger than the two other countries, like Liberia and Sierra Leone. That's why even the death toll is much lower, was much lower in Guinea with the Ebola crisis. But with all the everything that happened, we had some fundings, and I think the health system is still being reinforced. And our people were even used in the last Ebola outbreak, I think it was in DRC a few years ago. The Guineans were sent there. Some are still there, I think, working there. So in terms of human also and technical capacity of health workers, I think that we've improved that a lot. But surveillance, early warning, surveillance are things that we have already also developed, so that if there is any outbreak, it can be contained as quickly as possible. But all of these, of course, it's not about, it's not a one-day initiative. It's about keeping improving the system along the way.
Thank you so much. I think we've learned quite a lot from you. My question will be, most of our countries here, we rely very much on mining, and it's a sector that has very big importance. But then sometimes you find like big deposits in one specific area, and I think you alluded to that, how like one area becomes like a mining place, and you find maybe even a lot of government revenue is coming from that area. So if you award like a license to one major company, they kind of get some power, because if for some reason there's like a souring of the relationship between that company and government, there's too many people that are affected. So they have like some kind of power that they get in terms of not adhering to certain things that maybe government would want from that company. And what I've noticed is even change of like political regimes is also something that affects mining operations, to a point that when this mining company is eventually pushed out, there is a lot of legal battles, and governments lose quite a lot of revenues in such cases. So I wanted to find out, in the case of Guinea, what are some of the things that you could advise should be put as safeguards maybe in some of these contracts to manage some of these issues? And then maybe did you have any such occurrence, and if so, how did you deal with it? Thank you.
Yeah, look, you are referring to two things. One is the communities. I think that what is critical is for the state to take its responsibilities towards the communities. That is very important. In some cases, we've had protest issues in mining areas simply because the state has been like very on the back seat somehow, even with respect to basic social and economic infrastructure. So it's very important. That I was discussing with a big mining company recently. I told them, you guys should be lobbying for the state to do urban planning. That's the starting point. Because if you don't do that, you're going to have ghettos around the mining area. And you will go from 5,000 people to 100,000 people, and it creates all kinds of issues for your company. So that is one precise thing that is important. Regarding the mining company, I see no mining company that tries to control communities, because it can backfire. Because if you do that, then the communities will see you as being responsible for everything they need for their well-being. You cannot build roads, you don't have the budget for that. You cannot provide electricity for free, or maybe even it's paid. You cannot build dams, and that is for the state to do it. So as long as the state is ready to take its responsibilities, mining companies will accompany, and they have no issue with that, and they have no interest in controlling communities against the state, usually.
Maybe if I could clarify.
Yeah, sorry.
That, for instance, if they threaten to close down, it's the community that protests.
Yeah.
Because they depend on that mining company. Everything around that area, employment, supplies, schools, everything is built around the mine. So if it closes down, government is under pressure to make sure it doesn't close down. So it's like some form of bargaining power by the mine.
Yeah. No, you're right on that, but it depends on so many factors. Let me tell you one thing. There is no mining company that would prefer having a strong bargaining power and be shut down from time to time. No. Shutting down an operation, they are the one who loses the most part of the money, because in terms of share of revenues, usually it doesn't reach 50-50. So they have no interest to get some bargaining power that will help them in that situation. But where you're right is that, if it's shut down, it affects communities. So the state should be responsible enough. In any case, an operation is about to be shut down, to take preventive measures. We have some situation where it's not a shutdown. For instance, we had a railway that was built that was very good for the environment, but at the same time we have hundreds of truck drivers that were going out of job. So the question is what the state is doing in partnership with the company so that these people will not be left on the side. So it's all about how the state anticipates, put the right resources, and implement strong programs to compensate, no matter what is the reason why the company is shut down. The other thing is about going to arbitration with mining companies. Look, there is arbitration clause in all contracts for a good reason. But the issue is that people usually think arbitration means that we are enemies. No, it just means that there is a disagreement. So the arbitration can happen while the company is operating while the state is having its normal relationship with the company. As grown-ups, that's something that can happen. And also, there is sometimes partial arbitration, if I may call it. There is this precise issue on which we don't agree. You are a mining company, I'm a state. We don't agree on that partial issue, that very issue. But for the rest, we agree. So we go on arbitration just because it's a settlement mechanism, a conflict settlement mechanism in the contract. So as long as that's not seen as being just a fight, it's okay. But we have an issue in many countries. Investors are not enemies of anybody. Actually, it's like, and we have that hospitality in our culture, right? You tell somebody, come to my place, I will concede this for you, you will do that for me. You agree on that. The day you don't agree, maybe you will go apart, and then maybe they will leave, maybe. But at the end of the day, if politicians keep shooting at, hitting on investors in the countries, I mean, it makes no sense. Because in the first place, we are the one who asked them to come or accepted for them to come and settle in the country. It's our country. So at the end of the day, I'm sorry, that's why I say, don't be politicians. Because sometimes I don't see the rationale behind people saying, okay, they are the one that are stealing all our resources. If it's the case, if that's what you think, sit down with them. In some cases it's the case, I'm not saying it's not true. But sit down with them and say, okay, this is not fair. And something is clear. A deal that is not fair is not viable, is not sustainable, no matter what you do. So at some point, people will understand that a new regime calls them to sit down and discuss and negotiate. Of course, in some instances, it's a negotiation time. You have different negotiation tactics. People show muscles and things like that. The operation can be stopped for a few days, few weeks. But when I say the shutdown, it's the shutdown I was referring to as not as good as what we need in order to achieve our goals is when you completely kill the project, because at some point we had the case in Guinea. The alumni refinery was shut down for 6 years. You know what happened? The union, they came, they asked for things, there was a negotiation, they agreed. There were clearly reasonable offer that was made, but people said, no, we don't want it. The company cannot leave. That's what they said, because they cannot shut down the plant, because the plant was running for 40 years, 50 years, so they thought it was impossible. But overnight, it was shut down. Actually, when you shut down a factory, for some factories, it takes months to restart it, even if you shut it down for a few days. So people didn't realize all of that. So I think that the question is, do you have any other way to put pressure on the investor, on the partner in front of you, before getting to the extreme? That is the big question.
Well, speaking of shutting down, we're going to have to shut you down here, I'm afraid, because you have an airplane to catch.
I have an hour delay, so it's fine.
But I think it's been terrific, and I hope all of you have had a chance to, over these last couple of days, learn an awful lot about public policy, public service, and how to do these things without being a politician. So really, please join me in thanking our distinguished guest, Minister of Mines, ex-Minister of Mines, Abdoulaye Magassouba. Thank you.
Thank you.